Good morning, everyone. Welcome inside the Faith Loop. We are here again today talking some world, and a whole lot of Jesus. Let's do that. Yeah. That's probably the better part of it, I would imagine. Yeah. And today we're going to continue our conversation on the concept that I think is very important and shows us the whole thought process from the Genesis narrative. And today, we look throughout history and we're talking about the governments, everything that's happening in the world. And I think that's the important thing. We need to understand what's going on around us.
Absolutely.
I think it's very, you hear people on both sides. You hear, again, Republican, Democrat, this, that. The war of good and evil is from the knowledge of good and evil. We need to be aware and how we keep ourselves from eating from the wrong tree, correct?
Yes, I would agree.
So, throughout history, governments, whether ruled by one or many, we've had this belief or they have had this belief, not we. They've had this belief that there's a divine order, and we knew in the, European cultures, the divine right. So the question becomes, where does this idea of authority come from? And that's what we're going to discuss a lot today. How can we understand this? And I think we need to understand it. I believe very much we need to understand it in the view of the Genesis narrative, because we come back to this all the time. And I want you folks to understand, and this is why I continue to press this point, to say this over and over again. If we don't understand the Genesis narrative and the ramifications that came from that, we will not understand what's going on in the world around us.
Nope.
That's just a fact, right?
It's key. It's key. Yeah, it's key. If we don't understand the beginning or the foundation of anything, how can the rest of it stand up? Jesus, referred to that. If you build your house on a rock, it'll stand. You build your house on the sand, it's going to fall apart. So the foundation is very important. You ask any builder. I've been in homes, for instance, that they missed on the foundation, and they had to go back and jack it up and fix it because the house was falling down. So, that's literal. I've seen it happen twice. The foundation is very important, and Genesis is the foundation. It's where it all started.
Right, Dan, right. So how do we come to this? I know there's a lot of people, and the thing about it is, there's only, we call them chapters, 3 chapters. It's not a lot there, but you'd be surprised what you can understand from it. If we are willing to look and ask Jesus to help us understand and bring more.
And look at the meaning of the words.
Well, but then, yeah, Dad, exactly. And that's why I say, go to the website, go to rafministries.org, go to our Faith Loop page, go to the library. There are 2 booklets there that are very important. They will help you understand and then help you go look for yourself and look at these things. The Genesis narrative and the Adam syndrome. You need to read those. Go read them. So, in understanding authority, we can understand what we're seeing in our world today, because where it came from. And I want to start by saying, looking at this, because we looked at the word government yesterday, right? In the etymology dictionary. Go to the etymology dictionary. We have Justin, my crack engineer over there, has all the links there for you. We want you to have this information. We're not hiding anything. We're not trying to keep it. It's there. I'm showing you what we look at. And then when you look at the word authority, and we're talking from the English, it started about the 12th century. Autorite or octorite. Authoritative passage or statement, book or quotation that settles an argument. That's kind of a more modern approach to that. Passage from Scripture. There's the religious version or Christian version there. From Old French, autorite, octorite, authority, prestige, right, permission, dignity, gravity. All these words are part of, and we can use to describe authority in the English language. Gravity. The Scriptures, there you have the Protestant view of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sola script, only Scripture. I'm not going to say it in Latin because I butcher it. There you go. In the 12th century, modern French, autorite, I guess you'd pronounce the E. I don't know in French. From Latin, auctoritatem, nominative auctoritas, I guess. I'm not good with that. Invention, advice, opinion, influence, command. From auctor, A-U-C-T-O-R, auctor, master, leader, author. And this is the key word here. See author, noun. This is the key word here, author. Mid-14th century autor. There was no H in there. There was usually a C. The C was dropped around the 14th century. Okay? Actually, 16th century. But this word author, father, creator, one who brings about, one who makes or creates, someone or something. Auctor, author, originator, creator, instigator. 12th century modern French, and directly from the Latin auctor, promoter, producer, father, progenitor, builder, founder, trustworthy, writer, authority, historian, performer, doer, responsible person, teacher. The list goes on. So now you can understand why authority, and this becomes the thing. When you hear this word authority, we just kind of use it. We go, yeah, they're the ones, we don't mess with authority. You don't question authority. You don't. Well, this is the problem. This becomes the issue. In the Bible, the word authority is translated from a Greek word, exousia, in the sense of ability, privilege. We talked about this not too long ago. But it comes from the Greek word exesti, which exesti simply means existence. Who is the author of existence? And this, my friends, is at the crux of everything. And I said this yesterday if you were watching. The one word that stands out in all of this is the word authority. Because where do men derive their authority to set up governments? In the earth. And that's the point, isn't it?
It is. Good question. Mostly in man's way of looking at man's view of things, he does it himself. They set up men, or men set up themselves, as in the ancient days it was the kings. And the lineage, their sons and so forth, became the next king and so on and so forth. There were kings that actually killed their own sons because they were afraid of them. So how were they setting up authority? They would dethrone their own father. They would murder and kill to gain this position. So is that from the Lord? Is that the authority that we're talking about here? Is that authority not to be questioned, and so on and so forth? Men are doing it themselves. The Lord hasn't appointed nobody.
Now, let me further Dad's point here, and this is just from an author, Dr. Jenny Myers. She's the director of Foundation Relations. This link is in the post description, from University of Illinois Chicago. Okay, this is to show these in this article information from the Stella of Hammurabi. She says, while most people know of Hammurabi as the author of his famous law code, few know that tradition, and we're talking about Sumerian, ancient Sumerian. This goes way, this is one of the first. This is where we get a lot of the creation, the stories of gods and whatnot. Few know that the tradition of the ruler as the guardian and administrator of justice began much earlier in Mesopotamian history. Already in the 3rd millennium, a king called Uin Imingajini, I don't know, man. I can't pronounce
I wouldn't even try.
Right? 2350 BC, also known as Urukagina, that's a little easier to pronounce, commissioned a set of reforms that can be viewed as a precursor to the laws of Hammurabi. Scholars now hesitate to call these collections law codes because this term applies that the laws contained in a given collection were comprehensive, representing a complete law of the land. Rather, scholars believe there were various motivations for compiling lists of laws. Some of the collections appear to be scribal exercises in which scribes not only practiced their writing skills, but participated in the Mesopotamian intellectual tradition of compiling lists of everything in existence, including gods, professions, stars, and omens. Some law collections, such as those of Urnama, that's 2112 to 2095 BCE, Lipit Ishtar, 1943 to 1924 BCE, and Hammurabi, 1792 to 750 BCE, appear to have had political motivations. You want to see my shock face?
Yeah.
Either to justify their rule, or to demonstrate examples of justice and due process during a successful reign. Each begins with a prologue and ends with an epilogue, which provide justification for the ruler's authority bestowed upon him by the gods. To rule and administer justice on behalf of the gods, as mentioned above, Hammurabi, whose law collection is the largest example from Mesopotamia, not only portrayed himself as selected by the gods to be the provider of justice for his people, but cast himself in the image of the god of justice, the sun god Shamash. Okay, you can read some of the rest. And this talks about, and what I'm looking at here, think about this, provided justification for the ruler's authority. I'm gonna bring this into this because we only have a short amount of time. Okay, throughout history, we know that in the ancient world, there was another being that created us. Whether whether these other cultures recognize Jehovah or not, right? This has always been the issue. Why? And it points to it right there. Mankind has always looked for a way to usurp the authority of the Creator. And what does that mean? See, when you look at the word, we just looked at it, right? Mm-hmm. Father, author, creator, the one who set things in motion. Whether you say there's a God I'm emulating, you're still determining your own authorship. I'm the guy. And every one of these rulers had a different way of justifying their authorship, their authority. Just as we have all these different nations of the world working to justify their authorship, their authority. But where does authority come from?
Well, what comes to mind is this. We've long had this shoved down our throats, for lack of a better way of saying it, that this nation's God ordained, that nation's God ordained, this over here is God ordained, and we're God ordained, and God ordained this country, and so on and so forth. Well, okay. Then how come every time we turn around, something's different? Or one man has a different view than the other man? If it's all coming from God, it would all be the same.
Right.
The Lord, He don't change things. He said, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so if it's all from God, it would be the same thing right down the line.
Pretty consistent, right?
Yeah, it would be consistent. But we don't see that. And yet they'll stand up and they say, God bless this and God bless that. God isn't going to bless a mess. He's not going to bless sin. He's not going to bless missing the mark. He's not going to do that. So it's almost an affront to say that.
Yeah.
Because you have no right. If we are...
No, we don't have the exousia, the authority, the right, do we?
No, because we're not walking the way that the Lord would have us to walk. If you're going to translate a language, for instance, if you do it right, if you do it properly, every translator will come out with the same thing. You can't translate one sentence totally one way and then another guy come along and translate it totally some other way, because it means the same.
Yeah.
So,
and Dad, to your point, here's the next part of this. I think it started much earlier. We know it started much earlier than Darwin, but I think it even started much earlier than Lyell and some of these, men have thought about these things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
We have evolutionary theory in our culture today, and it's pretty dominant in much of the communist world.
Mm-hmm.
Science, follow the science, follow the science. See, so what this transition is, and what we've seen in this country and throughout the world, they are transferring authority from what everybody, and I'm not being in particular here to Christianity, but I'm talking about anybody with any kind of thought process of God or a creator. They're transferring that authority from that creator to the science, because science is now dictating the authorship of mankind. This is where we came from. Now, once we have that authority shifted out of the idea that we are created, we can define ourselves as we choose.
Yes, that's exactly what it's for. If there is no one central theme, no one central author, then we can decide for ourselves, as that was said to Adam. You can decide for yourself. You can choose good and evil. You can make it. You can say what it is.
It goes right back to it, doesn't it?
Goes right back to it. And so this is what we see around the world.
Yeah.
This one country says they're good. The other country says they're good. The other country says we got it right. The other country says we got it right. We in America, we say we're the greatest nation on earth. Well, if you go to other countries, they like their countries too. And so we have all these diverse views of things. If you got one central authority, for instance, the Supreme Court of the United States will pass on something. They will judge on something. That becomes
a precedent.
A precedent.
Yeah.
The model. You don't go out of it. You don't change it.
It becomes the idea of what the Constitution said.
Yes, and so it's there. And you can go into a court of law and cite it, and it stands up.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing is true of mankind. Mankind was not given the right. I spoke on this a few weeks ago when Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? Why do you call me good?" I mean, if anybody was good, Jesus was, in the sense that we understand good. But he said, "Why do you call me good?" The only reason that he said that, just to bring it all down, I mean, it was a long message, but to bring it down into simple terms, he said that because the Father Jehovah is the only one with the right to say what is good and what is not. He's the only one. He established it. He established right, and he established what is right to do. And if we step out of that and we go against that and say, no, we ain't living that way, I'll decide what's good, now we have usurped authority.
Right.
We've usurped it, and we have no right to do that.
See, now you see what's going on in the world too with what's happening with these things. The nations are disappearing in one respect. Okay, we still are there, and I understand people say, well, because we're to Russia, this, that. On the one side of it, you're having this idea from the Great Reset, the folks at Davos. We talk about the elite of the world. Their idea that they believe, and if you talk to many of these people, they believe they are smarter than everybody else and deserve and have the right to rule. This is almost a divine right thought process. They don't believe in God. They don't believe. So what's driving their narrative? This. When you see a Klaus Schwab, a Bill Gates, Justin Trudeau, man, flaming Canada is a disaster. I'm not going there right now.
Well, we're not a news program.
Look at John Kerry. You look at these men. Where are they deriving this authority from to say these things, to dictate to the world, this is the way we're going?
Right.
What is it? Do you know? We just said it a minute ago. Science.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So you can see what they're formulating to bring the world together.
But you know, that's flawed too, son, because I'll show you scientists that disagree.
No, I get you, Dad.
You know, so what
right.
which science, which one are you going to follow?
Yeah, I get you. Yeah. Exactly, you're right.
That's a great point.
It's a great point, and you made that. See, this is the problem with it, but this is where they're taking it. They're saying that science is the authority, and this is how they're deriving their authority to rule is from the science.
Yes.
And not just because of, not whether you take a shot. That's only one small part of it. We're talking climate control, climate change, environmental, social.
Yeah. Well,
social justice.
How many scientists in the world disagree with climate change? I mean, there's a bunch of them.
And Dad, and that's one thing that's big, but the other part of this is social justice and the science behind.
Yeah.
See, there's science behind social justice in psychological thought process.
How do we control the masses?
Social engineering. These are all scientific thought process that has been worked on for years and years and years, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's think tanks that sit around and do this. They just sit around and think about this stuff all the time. What can we do? What can we do? And they're not praying. They're not asking the Lord for advice. They're not asking anything like that. They're just sitting around trying to figure out, how can we do this? How can we get the folks to do this?
Right.
It's been going on from time immemorial. I don't doubt that the kings of ancient times had think tanks sitting around figuring out how they could.
They did. Okay. There's another point. Okay, let's take it back to the ancient world. We just read that article, University of Illinois, Chicago, right? She said these scribes, see, people forget a scribe not only was just somebody who could write, but they were usually advisors. Mm-hmm. They had advisors. When Moses went before Pharaoh, who came? The Magi. Those were Magi. These Magi came from the east. They were not these Christians or people that believe. They saw an omen in the sky. That's what they said. Yes. We followed his star.
Yep.
What did they see? They came from the east. This was preeminent. And these people advised the king. They had that was their think tanks.
Absolutely.
It's not different, Pop.
No, it isn't different.
We think we're so modern. And those were men just sitting around beating rocks with hammers.
Yeah.
It's so bad the way we think about the ancient world in that respect.
Absolutely.
Like these people weren't intelligent.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, they built pyramids that we can't even do. They built structures that we don't even know how they did it. We have no clue with all of our science, with all of our knowledge, with everything we think we know. Tell me how they did it. I've been in some of those places. I've stood in Baalbek, for instance. It's a 40-acre area where they built temples and so forth. Go look it up, Baalbek. It's in Lebanon, up from Beirut. And I stood there. I looked at a door. There was this door, and the guide is telling us there's a header over the door. A header is the
stone.
The stone that goes over the door. In modern times, it'd just be a 4x4 or something like that up there to strengthen the door. And he said that weighs 40 tons.
How'd they get it up there?
How'd they get it? 40 tons, just a header of a door. They set it up on there, 40 tons. They cut rock out of a quarry and moved it that is bigger than this room I'm in. I don't know how they calculated the weight, and they moved it. The steps as you go into Baalbek, you go up these beautiful steps in this stone. The stone's one piece. It's huge. It's one piece, and they carved the steps into the stone.
Yeah.
They carved them. They didn't take different stones and make it.
Yeah.
How'd they do it?
So
we don't know.
We have to understand, folks, the ancient world, the government, the thing, when we look at this, let's finish up this. We got a few minutes left, Dad. And I want to connect all the dots at this point. We talked about a lot of things. Go back and listen. Go look at these links in the post description. Genesis narrative. It wasn't about eating an apple.
No.
The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Did God really tell you that in the day that you partake, you listen to what I'm saying, you do this, you'll die? Mm-hmm. No. This is what it'll be. You'll be able to take the authority, create for yourself image and likeness, determine the earth, determine your own will, your movement.
Your own way.
And since then, this is what you see happening in the earth. This is what these kings of the ancient world, they said the gods because I think those people in that day were more aware of Jehovah. But if we say, no, it isn't Jehovah, it's this one, and I'm deriving my power from this God, how are they questioning that? Today, we have people saying they're deriving their power, their authority from the science. Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci sat there and said, I'm the science. You can't discard me. I'm the science, and what I say goes. What's different than what Hammurabi did back in Mesopotamia, Dad? Joe Biden, any of these people, Donald Trump. I know you can't put Donald Trump in that group. Yes, I can. Because they're just men. They're not even a man like Jesus Christ.
No.
So stop it with this nonsense, and let's look at the things for what they are.
Well, what come to mind there is when you talk about the ancients and the religions they used, the idolatry and all of that, it was fear. They feared everything, and the kings saw to it that the people would fear. The only reason they sacrificed to the idols was to get them to leave them alone. They didn't want them to interfere in their lives, so we'll take them a sacrifice. Maybe they'll leave us alone because they feared them. They were not in the blessing type God, so to speak, and they used fear. We still use fear today in politics, everything. What's been going on in the last couple of years here? Fear. I mean, people are walking around shaking in their shoes, afraid, fear. And yet, Jehovah, if you go to his side, he said there's no fear in love because love casts out fear. Perfect love casts out fear. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Yeah, it's the awe. That word
The
there is
reverence.
the reverence, awe of God. The
Listen to
awe.
what he has to say.
Listen to what he has to say. Pay attention. We don't have to walk around shaking in our boots if we walk right before the Lord. He's a blesser by his nature. He's a creator by his nature. And he will bless. He will put his hand upon you and bless because he loves us. He's not trying to trick us. I mean, some of the Greek gods, they were tricksters. Loki, he was a trickster. All those guys were tricksters. They would just, and the people feared them. They were scared to death of them. Well, that's so opposite. That's so opposite. And they're not idolaters in that sense of the word. They're not telling us about all these different gods and so forth, but they're still using the same tactic: fear, 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 fear.
There it is. We'll be back next week, guys. We're going to continue on this subject. We're going to bring the words, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these words and how they justice. We really don't know what justice really is. And, when I said that these guys justifying their authority, we're still trying to do the same. What does that mean? And how can man render justice? I think that's a very important subject. So we've talked about government. We've talked about authority. We're going to talk about justice next week. So make sure you stay tuned. And we care about you. We love you very much. Thank you for joining. Please share this out with your friends. If it's a blessing to your life, please do. We appreciate that very much. Thanks, Pop.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody have a great day in the Lord. Always remember to give love
And give life.
and give Jesus.